quirky way Americans elect a president. Republican nominee Mitt Romney trails Barack Obama in the polls. In a few hours, though, the former Massachusetts governor has a big opportunity to reverse the tide. It'll be his acceptance speech at his party's convention in Tampa, Florida. A balancing act where he needs to both energize a more and more conservative Republican base inside the hall and appeal to the undecided independent voters outside. Wednesday, it was his recently picked running mate's turn to state his case. We'll go over the biggest speech so far in the career of Paul Ryan and ask if the charismatic congressman from Wisconsin isn't a little bit upstaging the top man on the ticket. Our discussion, a chance to look at a party intent on making the election a referendum on the size of government and ask if that message is gaining steam or losing ground in a nation that now has universal health care and is looking for answers to bring down the jobless rate. Today in the France 24 debate, can they beat Obama? And with us to talk about it from Republicans Abroad, Stuart Haugen, thank you for being with us. Thanks to Douglas Grukoft of Democrats Abroad. Amy Green, who teaches political science, the author in French of America After Obama, soon in English?
We'll see.
Soon, all right, fingers crossed on that one. En cours. It's a pending project. And Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet, welcome back. Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet of Le Plus, the Nouvel Observateur, the Newsweekly magazine's interactive website. By the way, you can always weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and also on Twitter. You can find us at François F24. Let's begin in Tampa Bay, Florida, and France 24's Philip Crowder, who's got the advantage of going into this convention with a pair of fresh eyes. Sir, this is your first U.S. nominating convention. Was this how you pictured it, Philip?
Well, it's quite a spectacular sight, I must say. A very interesting thing to cover indeed. And we spent the best part of a year now covering all these caucuses that you just mentioned, the Iowa caucus and all those primaries that have been happening throughout the year. And coming here and seeing all those people that we saw along the way, again, the likes of Newt Gingrich or Herman Cain, remember them, they were presidential candidates and even front runners at a time. We see them again in the corridors here. So it's certainly an interesting time for a journalist. Now, as a newcomer to an event like this one, well, I personally am impressed by the organization of it all, by the seamless organization, it seems at least, of it. Everything is very, very carefully staged indeed, and any little protest that you might hear somewhere, any little incident will be reported on by the press, and there are many of us here. So it's very much a way of showing a united Republican Party that we're seeing here, and that is not something that we saw during the primaries. This is the first time where everybody really is getting behind Mitt Romney. Before that, a lot of Republicans themselves said, no, that's not the man I want to vote for. They were going for others like Rick Santorum or Herman Cain, for example, or Michelle Bachmann even. So it all comes together in a sense, really, for those of us reporting on this, and also, of course, for the nominee himself. Now, you said, yes, I do get inside the convention hall, but it takes a long time to get in here. Very, very strict security measures outside. We don't just walk in here. It's not as easy as that. You need a lot of credentials, and you get your car checked. A lot of armored police and armored National Guard around outside. It's a very impressive sight, and at times a little bit distressing as well, I'd have to say.
All right. So overcoming logistics, but you are inside the hall. That's the good news. Very briefly, Philip, what is the one thing that's sure to get the delegates going when you talk to them?
Well, it's getting Obama out of the White House. That is really what is uniting the Republican Party. It's not necessarily a candidate who is uniting this party. I've been speaking to a few delegates who admit that they had very different choices during the primaries, that they were going towards other candidates altogether and didn't really like Mitt Romney as a potential president of the United States. But it comes to this now. He is now the nominee on the Republican ticket, so now is the time for everybody to get behind him, and that is really what we're seeing here. This is a Republican Party that at least seems united, though when you do speak to one or two delegates, they'll admit that they have other worries altogether. Now, it is beating Barack Obama that gets them united. It's also very simple. We talk about this again and again. It is the economy. That is the answer we get to every single time we ask people, what is this election about? It is always the economy. It's improving the economy, and it's improving jobs, getting those jobless figures down.
Okay. All right, thanks for that. Philip Crowder there in Tampa, who will update us, of course, after that speech later on by Mitt Romney. Thank you for joining us. Amy Green, before we go to the rest of the panel, let me ask you, these conventions, some people criticize them as basically 4-day infomercials. Do they matter?
Conventions matter. I mean, if you take a look at the Republican convention, the Democratic convention next week, what's terrific about the conventions is that through the release of the platform, they give you throughout time a sense of where the party is, where the party is moving. So you have this group of issues, these sort of guiding principles and objectives that are laid out during each convention. So not only is it a chance for both parties to really rally around their candidate, really put their candidate and their policies into the spotlight, but it also gives you a really good sense of where the party is headed, what are the primary currents shifting within the party at any given time. So it's really a snapshot. But yes, absolutely they matter.
All right, and we'll be looking at that snapshot in a moment. In fact, let's look at a first snapshot in the marathon that is the race to the White House. Let's check the scoreboard ahead of Romney's speech. According to Talking Points memo there, you see the states in red are the ones going for Romney. The states in blue, where there are a lot more delegates in some instances, going for Obama. Obama with a clear advantage, but he doesn't have enough to seal the nomination. Not all of those are safe hands, those seats. How much of a bump, Stuart Haugen, do you expect when you look at that map? How much of a bump do you expect coming out of a convention like this one?
First of all, I'm not sure anymore because the dynamic has changed so much with political conventions, as you pointed out. We've known who's going to be the nominee for a long time. We've had the news about Paul Ryan for a fair amount of time. I think it'll be good. I'm sure there will be some bump, and I think it'll be a very positive bump. But I think what's more important is right now watching the trend. Even coming into this, you said that we're behind. That's not what the numbers say. The numbers now say that we're actually ahead, and in key states, things seem to be flipping. States that were not in question are coming into question, and others are flipping to our side. And I would point out, not only on the presidential level, but on the Senate level, Real Clear Politics today said that if there are no toss-ups, we win at least 51 seats in the Senate, which gives us control there, and it's if that happens, there's no doubt we control the House. So I'm very enthusiastic. I don't know what's going to happen coming out of this. We'll have to see what Barack Obama gins up next week. And then I think we log in for 8 weeks, sprint to the finish, and see what happens.
Douglas Kukov?
Well, I think there probably will be a fairly minimal bump for Mr. Romney because, as Stu points out, he's a pretty known quantity. And I don't think he's, I will see what he says in his speech, but I don't think there'll be any great surprises. And, I think the interesting thing this year is there seems to be a smaller group of undecided voters, of swing voters. And Mitt Romney, if he gets a little bump, it may be from energizing the base a little bit. The choice of Paul Ryan was intended to energize his base, and I think it points to one factor that will be, I think, unusually important in this election, which is the get-out-to-vote efforts of each party at the end.
So it was a smart move on Romney's part to have picked Ryan.
I think I would say that it's not a. I think a lot of the people in my party were quick to criticize the choice. I think I understand the reasons that Romney made the choice, but I think he chose the lesser of two evils in a sense. I think he had a choice between going for the centrist swing voters and going for Mr. Ryan. I think he made a calculated decision. It may be a good one or a bad one, but I think it was a very carefully calculated decision, and one that may cost him the state of Florida, but may help him, in his view, in 2 or 3 Midwestern states that he thought would be critical, and that Mr. Ryan may help him in a very narrow way in winning the 2 or 3 states that he think will be key. However, I think Obama's still clearly ahead in all the polls I've looked at and all the breakdowns of the states. So,
all right, we can get back. We can get back to that point. Philippe Moreau-Chevrolet, I know that at Le Plus you look very carefully at social networks and
yes.
Reaching that narrow number of undecided voters. What's trending when it comes to this convention?
It's Paul Ryan. I mean, the conventions are a great way to spot the new faces of a political party. When you go back to 2004, you could spot Obama having his first great speech, and it was a great way for him to introduce himself to Democratic voters. And Paul Ryan is really, indeed, a new thing, a real new and exciting thing in the Republican Party. He looks like a bit like Steve Carell. He's got a charismatic figure, and he looks a little bit like an average American too. He manages to be on the top and in the middle at the same time. It's good.
Amy Green, Paul Ryan's speech was an interesting one because he didn't come out as hawkish as some might have expected.
That's right. I mean, his speech, you could read some of the articles today. You could even hear the commentary last night after his speech debating the factual accuracy of his speech, the certain omissions, the fuzzy nature of some of the things that he said. The reality is the speech was designed to generate excitement, to show a passionate, young, capable, strong voice, to rally conservatives, to rally Republicans. His speech succeeded in doing that.
To rally conservatives or to
Absolutely.
win over independents? Because it seemed to me as though he didn't.
Sure. I mean, it was supposed to be also, I think, a punch to excite independents, but we can still see that Romney's having a lot of trouble winning swing voters. My fellow panelists mentioned some of the polls that show Barack Obama ahead. Sure, the results are still razor thin. It's still neck and neck, but you look at the polling in states like Michigan, you look at Ohio, which is leaning more and more towards Obama, you look at Pennsylvania, and the math gets difficult for Romney. So I think that Paul Ryan's job is to sort of shake things up, to present a young, vital, youthful face to this ticket, but ultimately I don't believe it changes the fundamental dynamics of the race.
All right, at the outset we heard our correspondent in Tampa, Florida, Philip Crowther, say that jobs and the economy were the #1 issue on the minds of the delegates. However, Paul Ryan making it clear in his acceptance speech that Obamacare would be, of course, on the table. No mention of his own plan in his speech, one that talks about a voucher system for Medicare. But he did go on the attack when it came to Obamacare, saying, quote, "We will win this debate."
What did taxpayers get out of the Obama stimulus? More debt. That money wasn't just spent and wasted. It was borrowed, spent, and wasted.
All right. So and at one point towards the end of his speech, he said, "We want to put the safety back in the safety net." That doesn't sound like a...
Well, it's always a tragedy to me to listen to Democrats talk about, they want to gut Medicare, they want to change Medicare, eliminate Medicare as we know it. Well, Medicare as we know it is $34 trillion in the hole if you project forward. $34 trillion, and that even Democrat economists don't dispute that. That's future unfunded liabilities. $34 trillion is almost three times our gross national product. Nobody talks about that. We talk about a $16 trillion debt and a $1.4 trillion deficit. We don't talk about the fact that
does Ryan's own plan make him vulnerable in the fall?
Well, why would it make him vulnerable? It should only make him vulnerable if people are so stupid that they believe we can continue doing what we're doing today and somehow fill that gap, that we can continue. The point is very simple. We have a $1.4 trillion deficit. Let's take Barack Obama's approach and make the rich pay through the nose. We could confiscate 100% of the income of the rich, entre guillemets, as the French would say, in the United States. That is less than $1.4 trillion. You take away 100% of their annual revenue, you can't fill the debt for 1 year of Obama spending. Then what do you do next year? I mean, seriously, you cannot tax your way out of this problem.
The Democrats would answer to that the deficit was created really by George Bush
don't forget that. I'm talking about $34 trillion of future liabilities. It's not about the deficit or the debt. You cannot cover our current deficit if you seized all the money made by the rich. You couldn't pay 1 year's deficit. So this whole idea that we can tax our way out of it, it's an absurdity.
Douglas Kukoff?
Well, I think one needs to look at...
Do you disagree with the numbers, Doug?
I don't know for sure the numbers you're putting out there. What I do know for sure is that the Democrats also believe that the entitlements need to be reformed over the long term, and all economists have also Republican and Democrat economists
Where is the Obama plan for reform,
excuse me, have all said that Ryan's own plan simply doesn't add up, that he cannot solve the problem with his own plan, that some additional revenues will be necessary in addition to tax cuts and spending cuts. And I would also point out that Mr. Ryan was part of a bipartisan a group that was intended to come up with a major plan to overhaul the entitlement programs and financial stability of the United States. And he pulled out of it, unlike other Republicans, when he realized that there would be some revenue enhancements that would be needed to make anything work. So the man is selling snake oil. And I think most of the American public recognizes that.
But I think that this very debate is actually illustrative of a larger issue, which is that part of the reason Paul Ryan was brought onto the ticket was to really focus home on this message of the economy. But what we see is that there's also a side effect, which is that the addition of Paul Ryan onto the ticket takes away from what Mitt Romney has been trying to make his central focus, which is the economy, and we get into the brass tacks of the Ryan plan. So it could be a liability to the Republicans in the fall.
One of the main problems is that we talk about Paul Ryan and not Mitt Romney. And obviously, Mitt Romney...
Good leaders always put very strong people around themselves.
Yeah, but
Mitt Romney does not have a problem with this.
He put two strong figures on the front. I mean, his wife was even better than him. He was.
Well, you don't know. You haven't seen him tonight.
I've seen Ann Romney. She's very good.
But you have
She's
not
better
seen
than
Mitt Romney speak. And I don't think Mitt Romney's not the kind of guy who worries about how comes across as a speaker. He's a leader, he's a decision maker, and he's got a track record.
He lacks some empathy. He lacks some...
Only because people say he lacks
it.
No, only because Barack Obama has empathy. Barack Obama is an elite, arrogant intellectual. He doesn't like people. He doesn't like people.
Yeah, I'm not judging. I'm just saying.
What you're saying?
I don't think that people.
I don't think you're right.
Excuse me. I don't think anyone can run for a major office of the United States, whether it's Mitt Romney or Barack Obama, and be antithetical to people or not have some empathy. You can't. You simply cannot attract voters if you don't like people. So I'm not going to say that Mitt Romney doesn't have empathy and he's not a caring person. But please don't make a ridiculous statement that Barack Obama does not like people. You simply cannot work a room. You cannot work a room.
He doesn't work a room. His own contributors don't like him because he throws them away as soon as he gets the money.
It's amazing for a man that nobody likes became president of the United States.
No, but people have second thoughts, and this will come around.
I don't think empathy is the weakest point of Obama's communication. Obviously, he's strong on that point.
Well, he talks a good line. He hasn't done anything. Yeah, that's the real problem.
He's warm towards people. I mean, Romney is not warm enough. That's the truth.
Barack Obama is not warm towards people. Only in mass audiences.
He doesn't appear to be warm. I don't know him personally.
Final word before we go to the break, Amy Green?
I think that for the millions of Americans suffering from unemployment and other grave situations in their family, the likability of Obama or Romney is probably not the first thing on their mind.
Exactly.
I would say that the message is the economy.
Yeah, but you don't vote only with your brain. You also vote with your emotions,
Absolutely,
obviously.
But I think Barack Obama and Mitt Romney alike would probably prefer that the debate focus on the issues rather than on is Obama...
but it's not just about the issues. When we come back, we'll pick up on this point. You're watching the France 24 debate.